The air inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas is thick, heavy with the kind of collective electricity that only a historic world championship can produce. Every single seat is packed, every pair of eyes is locked onto the center of the room, where the chain-link structure of the octagon stands like a modern gladiator's arena. The atmosphere is vibrating. The crowd's roar rises in waves, a deafening wall of sound that echoes off the concrete ceiling and reverberates right through the floorboards. Tonight is not just another fight card. This is a collision of eras, styles, and sheer, unadulterated willpower. Out from the darkened tunnel, cutting through the strobing lights and the smoke, comes the challenger. Big Daddy doesn't just walk. He marches with a heavy, deliberate purpose that signals a man utterly consumed by belief. Every stride he takes is measured, grounded, and fueled by months of brutal, unforgiving preparation. He looks completely at ease under the blinding glare of the spotlight, his mind entirely made up. Tonight, in his own mind, is the night the belt changes hands. His camp has gone off without a single flaw. His body is sculpted into a weapon of mass destruction, and as he glides toward the cage, he carries the hopes of Cape Town, South Africa, right on his broad shoulders. He steps up the steps, rubs his boots against the canvas, and locks his eyes on the center of the cage, waiting for what he believes is his inevitable coronation. Yet, the throne does not empty easily. From the opposite side of the arena, a sudden surge of noise erupts as the reigning, defending king makes his presence known. Rolf the Dragon Lee emerges from the shadows with a terrifyingly quiet grace. There is no frantic jumping, no wild screaming, just the ice-cold focus of a true martial arts master who has walked this lonely road before. He moves with a fluid, hypnotic rhythm, completely in the groove, right at the absolute peak of his athletic prime. Every sparring session, every drop of sweat shed in the gym, every tactical adjustment has led to this exact second. He steps into the octagon not with the desperation of a challenger, but with the calm, unshakable authority of a champion who refuses to let go of what is his. The contrast between the two men is striking, the towering, imposing frame of the challenger versus the compact, explosive, lightning-fast executioner holding the gold. The tale of the tape tells a story of physical divergence. Lee stands as the veteran, 7 years older and wise beyond measure, while Big Daddy towers over him with a towering height advantage and a formidable 5-inch reach that promises to dictate range. The referee calls them to the center, bringing a momentary pause to the roaring crowd as the veteran voice of the octagon takes the microphone. The formal introductions cut through the noise with theatrical perfection. In the blue corner, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall, scaling the scales at a lean and powerful 170 pounds, fighting out of Cape Town, South Africa, the challenger Big Daddy. The crowd erupts again, a mix of cheers and nervous anticipation. Then the spotlight shifts to the red corner. Standing 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighing in at 185 pounds, fighting out of Los Angeles, California, the reigning defending UFC welterweight champion of the world. The Dragon Lee. The tension hits a boiling point. The referee brings them in close, issuing the final mandatory warnings. Protect yourselves at all times, follow instructions, let's have a clean fight. The fighters nod, their eyes locked in a mutual acknowledgement of the violence that is about to unfold. They retreat to their respective corners, breathing heavily, feeling the weight of history resting on their shoulders. The wait is finally over. The seconds stretch out like hours. Ding, ding, ding. The bell sounds and the first round explodes into motion instantly, maintaining that unbroken, cinematic flow without a single stutter. Big Daddy enters wearing white trunks, while the champion moves in sleek black trunks. Right from the opening seconds, the magnitude of this matchup is put into sharp focus. This isn't just a feeling-out process. It's a high-stakes chess match played at top speed. Big Daddy tries to establish his range, utilizing his massive reach advantage, throwing out probing jabs to keep the champion at bay. But Lee is a ghost, slipping past the punches with subtle head movement, stepping inside with incredible footwork, looking to pierce the challenger's defenses with razor-sharp counters. That was his power, and it was that very power, that quiet, unbothered confidence, that was about to drive his challenger to the edge. The storm was coming, brought in by a young man who was undefeated, arrogant, and hungry. But for this brief, frozen moment, all we had was the stillness of the third row and the mounting, suffocating weight of 3,000 people, waiting for a bell that would change everything. The setup was perfect, the stage was set, and the quiet was about to be shattered in a way that would echo for decades. Arrogance in the face of greatness. The silence of the arena didn't last. It was torn apart by the arrival of a force that seemed entirely too big for the room. While Bruce sat in the third row, calm and contained, the focus of the arena shifted violently toward the center of the mat. Out walked the man who would define the chaos. He was 22 years old, standing at a towering 6'5", and weighing in at a solid 245 pounds of pure, unchecked momentum. He was the reigning European champion, a product of the full-contact world, and from the moment he stepped onto the floor, he carried an air of absolute, unearned certainty. This young man wasn't just here to win a trophy, he was here to validate a worldview. He had been trained since he was 13 and lifting since he was 15, built like a fortress that had never been tested by anything it couldn't simply crush. When you are that young, that strong, and that undefeated, you tend to develop a dangerous blind spot. You begin to believe that your strength is the only truth, that if something doesn't bow to your power, it must be flawed. He didn't know that he was about to collide with a version of reality he hadn't even imagined existed. The tournament bracket had been his playground all day. He moved through the competition not like a participant, but like a storm tearing through a forest. He didn't just win, he finished people. He didn't just score points, he silenced opponents. In the semifinals, he dismantled a formidable fighter in 19 seconds flat. The final blow, a roundhouse kick, was so loud, so concussive, that the people in the front rows felt the air pressure change before their eyes could even register the movement. When that kick landed, the arena didn't erupt in cheers. It went quiet. It was the kind of silence that happens when a crowd realizes that the person in front of them is capable of doing real, lasting damage, and they aren't sure if they should be applauding or calling for help. The final match against a tough Californian practitioner lasted less than 2 minutes. It ended with a knockout that was clinical, brutal, and efficient. And then the bell rang. This was the moment. The moment where the script of the evening should have been followed, where the rules of decorum were supposed to hold the chaos at bay. The tournament director, Ed Parker, walked out to present the trophy, a massive, shining edifice of chrome and walnut. It was a gesture of respect, a conclusion to the ritual. The winner was supposed to bow, take the hardware, show it to the cameras, and exit the stage so the rest of the night could proceed. But this young man didn't bow. He didn't look at the trophy. He didn't leave the mat. Instead, he walked past the director, reached out and snatched the microphone from the announcer's stand. The air in the arena shifted instantly. 3,000 people sensed it at the exact same time, the violation of the unspoken law. You don't take the mic. You don't seize the spotlight when it's not yours. The room went unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. He stood there, holding the trophy in one hand and the microphone in the other, and he began to speak. At first, it sounded like a victory speech. He thanked the hosts. He thanked the Swedish Federation. He did the polite thing for about 45 seconds. But then, the tone turned sharp. He started talking about the difference between the dancing he had seen in American point karate, where a tap on the chest stopped the fight, and the real fighting he was used to back in Europe. He talked about full contact, about real punches, about the difference between performance and reality. The crowd began to murmur. It wasn't a roar, just a nervous ripple of conversation. They knew exactly where this was going, and it made them uncomfortable. They watched as the young champion kept talking, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who has never been told no. He started mentioning Chinese kung fu. He mocked the idea of it being a complete system. He mentioned he had been watching a certain television show, and he dismissed it as Hollywood flash. He called it fake. He called it a performance. He slips and rips, pivoting beautifully off his lead foot to deliver a soul-crushing left hook directly into Big Daddy's liver, followed instantly by a straight right hand to the jaw. It is right here, midway through the second round, that the fight sees its first drawn blood. Lee catches Big Daddy coming in with a razor-sharp counter right hand that slices through the challenger's defense like a scalpel. The sharp blow opens up a jagged cut across the bridge of Big Daddy's nose and near his eyebrow. Crimson streams down the challenger's face, painting his chest and white trunks in deep red streaks. The sight of his own blood doesn't make Big Daddy back down. If anything, it sparks a wild, violent fire inside him. He roars, stepping through the red mist and letting his hands fly in a furious barrage of heavy leather. Big Daddy throws bombs, swinging wide, heavy hooks that carry the weight of a man possessed. One massive, overhand right clips Lee right on the temple, causing the champion's knees to buckle for a split second. The crowd explodes into a deafening frenzy, sensing that the champion might be in real trouble. Big Daddy smells blood and swarms forward, pinning Lee against the chain-link fence, raining down brutal body shots and relentless knees from the clinch. Lee's championship pedigree shines through the chaos. Instead of panicking, he covers up tightly, rolling with the heaviest shots and using his shoulders to deflect the brunt of the punishment. He stays patient inside the furnace, waiting for Big Daddy to overcommit. The moment Big Daddy loads up on a heavy left hook, Lee ducks underneath the wide arc, executes a flawless angle change, and circles out to the center of the canvas. Now back in open space, the champion turns up his own offensive heat. He begins targeting the challenger's damaged face with microscopic precision. A stiff, snapping jab keeps Big Daddy's sight lines obstructed by his own blood, and every time the challenger tries to close the gap, Lee meets him with devastating roundhouse kicks directly to the ribs. The skin on Big Daddy's right torso is turning a dark, sickly shade of purple, a clear indication of internal trauma that will severely drain his gas tank as the fight wears on. With less than a minute remaining in the second frame, the round hits a dramatic climax. Big Daddy steps in for a heavy head kick, but Lee reads the movement instantly. He leans backward just enough for the shin to breeze harmlessly past his face, then explodes forward with a frame-shifting three-punch combination. A crisp jab, a straight right, and a devastating lead hook that lands squarely on the point of Big Daddy's chin. Big Daddy's legs completely give out. He crashes heavily onto his back near the edge of the octagon. Lee dives in like a predator, raining down a brutal flurry of ground and pound, trying desperately to force the referee to stop the fight before the round ends. Heavy hammer fists crack against Big Daddy's guard. But the challenger is an absolute warrior. Despite being heavily hurt and bleeding profusely, he manages to pull Lee into his full guard, wrapping his arms tightly around the champion's waist to kill the momentum and buy precious seconds. Big Daddy lands a stiff punch from his back, clearing his head just enough to scramble as the final seconds tick away. The horn sounds to end round 2, leaving both men standing over a canvas stained with blood, sweat, and sheer determination. The striking war has reached its absolute boiling point, but as the fighters head toward the third round, the battle is about to take an even more demanding, grueling turn into the unforgiving world of mat wrestling. The stool is pulled away from the center of the canvas, and the third round explodes into motion with zero hesitation, maintaining that unbroken, cinematic momentum. Big Daddy rises from his corner looking like a man who has walked through a storm and barely survived. His midsection is painted in a brutal palette of deep, angry purples and swollen welts, a direct souvenir from Lee's relentless body kicks in the previous frame. Blood continues to trickle from the bridge of his nose, mixing with the sweat pouring down his forehead. Yet, despite the mounting damage, the challenger's eyes still burn with fierce desperation. He cannot afford to give an inch, and he knows it. As they meet in the center of the canvas, Big Daddy tries to reclaim the initiative by throwing a heavy, looping right hook designed to end the fight in a single blow. But Lee is entirely dialed in, his defensive instincts operating on pure muscle memory. He effortlessly dips underneath the wild punch, pivots on his lead foot, and immediately returns fire with a razor-sharp combination that targets the exact spots he has softened up over the last 10 minutes. A cracking kick lands squarely against Big Daddy's ribs, followed instantly by a blistering knee that drives straight into the challenger's midsection with sickening impact. Big Daddy winces visibly, his breath catching in his throat as the heavy strike robs him of his oxygen. For a fraction of a second, his hands drop lower to protect his battered torso, and in the elite world of championship mixed martial arts, a fraction of a second is all a master like Lee needs. In a lightning-fast blur, the champion changes levels. Dropping his weight instantly, Lee explodes forward with a picture-perfect double-leg takedown, wrapping his arms securely around Big Daddy's thighs and driving him backward. The massive challenger, despite his size advantage, has no answer for the timing and sheer leverage of the champion. With a loud thud that echoes through the arena microphones, Big Daddy is dumped flat onto his back in full guard, right in the center of the octagon. The entire landscape of the fight shifts dramatically in an instant. The explosive striking war transforms into a high-stakes, suffocating grappling chess match. Lee settles onto the canvas with complete authority, establishing a heavy base that makes him feel like he weighs 300 pounds. He posts up, creates posture, and begins raining down short, sharp punches and blistering elbows that cut through Big Daddy's guard. The crowd's roar swells into a rolling wave as the mat becomes a canvas of dynamic scrambling. Big Daddy refuses to be a passive victim. Using his long limbs, he frames against the champion's shoulders, fighting tooth and nail to create space, shrimp his hips, and escape the suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. With a sudden, violent burst of energy, Big Daddy bucks his hips hard, using the cage wall for leverage. He executes a brilliant reversal, catching Lee off guard and wrestling his way on top, transitioning smoothly into half guard, and then pushing hard for side control. The momentum swings wildly in a matter of seconds. Now on top, Big Daddy tries to capitalize, driving a heavy elbow into the champion's ribs to return the favor. But Lee's ground defense is just as slippery as his striking. The champion remains completely composed, using intelligent hip escapes and active guard play to neutralize the ground and pound before it can do catastrophic damage. Midway through this grueling third round, the physical toll on both athletes is staggering. They are drenched head to toe in sweat, their breathing heavy and labored, yet their technical precision hasn't dipped by a single percentage point. Lee initiates another lightning-fast transition, slipping his hips out from underneath, framing a brilliant counter-reversal that puts him right back in a dominant side control position. The champion begins working his submission game with chilling efficiency. He slides an arm under Big Daddy's chin, threatening a tight guillotine choke, forcing the challenger to completely abandon any offensive thoughts and focus entirely on survival. Big Daddy tucks his chin defensively, using every ounce of his remaining strength to defend the neck, arching his back and fighting through the pressure until he finally slips his head free from the danger zone. With just over a minute remaining on the clock, Big Daddy scrambles desperately, utilizing a frantic series of movements to return the fight to the feet. They break apart, standing face to face once again, battered, bruised and bleeding. The damage on Big Daddy's face is now severe. The swelling around his eyes is thickening rapidly, making it harder for him to track incoming punches, and his nose is completely compromised, forcing him to breathe heavily through an open mouth. Yet, the challenger digs deep into the absolute deepest reserves of his conditioning. He begins throwing unpredictable, unorthodox kicks, mixing up his rhythm to catch the champion off guard. Just as Lee steps forward to counter, Big Daddy times a clever trip, catching the champion's lead foot and sending him tumbling down to the mat in the final seconds of the round. As the horn sounds to signal the end of round 3, Lee immediately bounces back to his feet with a confident smile, while Big Daddy walks heavily back to his corner, his chest heaving violently. The referee checks the grotesque damage on the challenger's nose, allowing the fight to continue, but the warning signs are glaring. The championship rounds are looming right ahead, and the battle is hanging by a razor-thin thread. The fourth round bell echoes sharply across the arena, and without a single moment of hesitation, the narrative flows straight into the deepest, most dangerous waters of the entire fight. But the 3,000 people in that room were no longer untrained. They were watching him, and they were beginning to understand that the man in the black trousers was the most dangerous person in the building. He reached the edge of the mat and stopped. He looked at the floor, then at the challenger. Still, he said nothing. He didn't need to bark a rebuttal. He didn't need to insult the man who had just insulted him. He reached up and unbuttoned his jacket. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost maddeningly so. He folded the jacket once, neatly, as if he were placing it on a chair in a quiet office, and laid it on the barrier. Underneath, he wore a black training top. He kicked off his shoes, the casual streetwear shoes of a civilian, and set them perfectly straight beside the jacket. He was barefoot now, his feet meeting the canvas, his toes gripping the mat. He walked to the center of the floor. He stopped about 8 feet away from the young giant. The height difference was laughable. 7 inches of pure, muscle-bound ego towering over a man who looked, in comparison, like a wisp of smoke. The challenger was vibrating with aggression, his fists balled, his breathing heavy. Bruce, on the other hand, was standing with his hands open at his sides. He wasn't guarding, he wasn't posturing, he was just standing there. This, the crowd realized, was the wait. It wasn't theatrical. He wasn't posing for the cameras or trying to intimidate the challenger with a tough guy glare. He was simply waiting for the next thing to happen. It was the patience of a predator, or perhaps the patience of a teacher, waiting for a child to stop crying so the lesson could begin. It was the most honest moment in the history of that arena. Everyone there, from the front row to the very back, understood without being told that the man who looked smaller was, in every dimension that mattered, the larger figure on the mat. He wasn't standing there to fight. He was standing there to provide an answer. Ed Parker, the man who had been running the tournament, realized that the situation had crossed a line. You can't issue a challenge like that in front of 3,000 people and have it ignored. The air was too tight, the expectation too high. He stepped to the microphone, his voice tight, his face mirroring the unease of everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen," Parker announced, the words vibrating through the speakers. "Unscheduled exhibition. 3 minutes, 1 round, full contact." He paused, looking between them. He could feel the disparity. Dolph Lundgren, European Kyokushin champion, versus Bruce Lee. The crowd noise didn't just return, it exploded, doubling in intensity. It was the sound of a lid being blown off a pressure cooker. But as the roar washed over them, Bruce didn't blink. He waited for the signal. He was in the zone, in that strange, silent and terrifying space where the world shrinks down to the distance between two souls. He was ready. And as Parker raised his hand to start the clock, the young challenger stepped forward, ready to unleash everything he had, unaware that he was stepping directly into a lesson that would dismantle everything he thought he knew about himself. Ed Parker raised his hand, the air in the arena snapping tight, and he said it. Fight. The word hadn't even finished vibrating in the air before the challenger moved. It was a blur of motion, a testament to the raw, unrefined power that had carried him to the top of the European circuit. Dolph came forward with the explosive, linear aggression of a Kyokushin fighter. He launched a front kick, a devastating, piston-like strike with his full body weight committed to the impact. The exact same strike that had ended his semi-final match in under 20 seconds. He was looking for a knockout, a highlight reel finish to validate his ego. But when his foot reached the space where a man was supposed to be, there was nothing but air. Bruce wasn't there. He had shifted. It was an angle, a 45-degree movement that looked, from the stands, as if he had simply vanished and reappeared a heartbeat later. He didn't scramble, and he didn't panic. He had moved inside the kicking range before Dolph's foot had even reached its target. His right hand was chambered, a potential lightning strike loaded and ready, but he didn't fire it. He just reset. He stood there, completely unbothered, while the challenger's momentum carried him forward into empty space. The next 90 seconds were a masterclass in the difference between fighting with force and fighting with understanding. Dolph was hunting. He was throwing everything he had, the lead leg roundhouse, the spinning back kick, the classic punch-punch low kick combination that had shattered his previous opponents. He was a machine, running through his entire library of techniques, searching for a way to land, searching for a way to connect. They walked back to their corners through a sea of roaring fans, knowing that only one brutal final 5-minute round remains to decide the fate of the undisputed UFC welterweight championship of the world. The heavy metal stool is snatched away from the center of the canvas for the very last time, and the 5th and final round of this epic championship war explodes into motion with an intensity that makes the previous 4 frames feel like a mere warm-up. The roar of the 30,000 fans inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena reaches a deafening, fever-pitch crescendo, shaking the concrete foundations of the building. Every single person in attendance knows they are witnessing history unfold right before their eyes. Roth, the Dragon Lee's corner, has drilled a stark, unvarnished reality into their champion's head during the 1-minute respite. The top contender has been utterly relentless, bringing the fight to him with terrifying efficiency. If the champion does not secure a definitive finish in these final 5 minutes, the belt that has rested so securely on his waist for so long is going to slip through his fingers. On the opposite side of the canvas, Big Daddy stands battered, bruised, and bleeding profusely from his heavily damaged nose, yet his posture is that of a man standing on the absolute precipice of destiny. He is just 5 minutes away from immortality. Ding, ding, ding! The final bell sounds, and they rush toward each other with the terrifying speed of 2 runaway freight trains. There is no feeling-out process left, no tactical hesitation, just raw, unadulterated survival and the burning desire for glory. Big Daddy fires first, launching a devastating, whipping kick to the midsection that finds its mark with sickening precision. Lee winces visibly, the sheer force of the blow driving all the oxygen out of his lungs and causing him to wince in acute pain. He stumbles backward for a half step, clutching at his ribs, looking for a split second like a man ready to collapse. Sensing blood in the water, Big Daddy swarms forward, throwing heavy, looping hooks designed to decapitate. But Lee's survival instincts are legendary. Ducking underneath a wild, overhand right, the champion clinches up, pressing his forehead against Big Daddy's chest and initiating a masterclass in precise, dirty boxing. With his back pressed briefly against the cage, Lee begins firing razor-sharp elbows and short, chopping punches into the challenger's ribs and jawline. Every single strike is calculated to drain whatever microscopic amounts of energy Big Daddy has left in his gas tank. They battle fiercely for dominant position inside the clinch, their arms locked, sweat flying off their brows in glittering arcs under the arena lights. Big Daddy tries to answer with a heavy knee to the body, but Lee blocks it expertly with his forearm, instantly pivoting off the fence and creating open space in the center of the octagonal cage. Now back in the open, the pace reaches a blistering, frantic peak. Both men are throwing punches with terrifying frequency, abandoning all defensive protocol because neither man is willing to leave anything in reserve. Big Daddy gets caught cleanly with a sharp, lightning-fast roundhouse kick right to the side of his head, his legs wobbling momentarily before he catches his balance and fires back with a massive left hook that whistles through the air just inches away from Lee's chin. 3 minutes remain on the clock in the fifth and final round. The damage accumulated over 25 minutes of continuous violence is now visually staggering. Big Daddy's face is a crimson mask of swelling and blood. Both of his eyes are nearly swollen shut, restricting his vision, forcing him to rely on spatial awareness and sheer instinct. Lee's body is decorated with deep, ugly bruises, his breathing coming in deep, ragged pulls. Yet, neither man slows down. They continue to meet in the center of the canvas, trading blow for blow in an exchange that leaves the crowd standing on their feet, screaming themselves hoarse. Big Daddy digs deep into the absolute bottom of his reserves, mixing up his striking arsenal with remarkable unpredictability. He fakes a high kick, dips low, and launches a crushing front kick straight to Lee's liver. The champion drops his hands for a fraction of a second, hurt badly by the body shot, wincing in unmistakable agony. Big Daddy presses the advantage, landing a crisp jab, followed by a thunderous right hand that clips the champion's temple. With just under 2 minutes left on the clock, Big Daddy decides to seal his fate with the ultimate statement of authority. As Lee steps in to throw a combination, the challenger executes a brilliantly timed, picture-perfect trip, sweeping the champion's lead foot out from under him and sending Lee crashing heavily onto his back. The crowd erupts into a deafening roar as Big Daddy dives down into the guard, eager to close out the fight with dominant ground control. Lee, ever the veteran technician, immediately ties up the challenger's wrists, preventing any heavy ground and pound, while trying desperately to work a sweep from his back. But Big Daddy refuses to let go of his position. He postures up, slips through the half guard, and establishes a suffocating side control, driving his shoulder into the champion's chin and pressing him firmly against the canvas. The final minute ticks away with agonizing slowness. Big Daddy maintains his heavy pressure, moving smoothly into a mounted crucifix and smothering every attempt the champion makes to escape. The blood from the challenger's nose drips continuously onto the canvas, forming a dark puddle beneath them as the final 10 seconds tick down. The fighters scramble one last time as the referee urges them to work, and with 10 seconds remaining, they break apart, rising to their feet and swinging wildly as the final horn sounds. Horn! The entire arena instantly erupts into a thunderous standing ovation. The 25-minute war is over. Both men drop their hands, completely exhausted, their bodies battered beyond recognition. They walk toward each other, the mutual respect forged in the fires of competition instantly taking over. They embrace tightly in the center of the octagon, leaning on each other for support, exchanging quiet words of acknowledgement for the war they just waged. The referee separates them, raising both of their arms in a salute to their unbelievable heart and resilience. The canvas is stained with blood, sweat, and history. The fighters retreat to their respective corners, wrapped in towels, chests heaving, waiting for the ultimate verdict. The legendary veteran voice of the octagon, Bruce Buffer, steps forward, taking the microphone in hand, as the crowd slowly quiets down to a breathless hush. The judges have collected their scorecards, and the tension inside the MGM Grand is thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Buffer's voice booms across the arena speakers, echoing off every wall and into the ears of millions watching around the globe. After 5 hard-fought, grueling rounds of championship mixed martial arts, we go to the judges' scorecards for a decision. The arena holds its collective breath. You could hear a pin drop. Judge 1 scores the contest 48-47. Judge 2 scores the contest 49-26. And Judge 3 scores the contest 48-47. A split second of hesitation hangs in the heavy air before Buffer delivers the historic verdict with thunderous authority. Declared the winner by unanimous decision, and the new undefeated UFC welterweight champion of the world. Buffer pauses for dramatic effect as the spotlight locks fiercely onto the challenger. "Big Daddy!" The entire arena explodes into an absolute earthquake of noise, flashing lights, and flying confetti. Big Daddy drops to his knees in the center of the octagon, burying his bloodied face in his hands, as tears of pure, unadulterated joy mix with the sweat and crimson streaming down his cheeks. Months of brutal training, unyielding sacrifices, and unwavering belief have finally culminated in this exact, glorious second. The championship belt is wrapped around his waist, heavy and glittering under the lights, marking the dawn of a brand new era in mixed martial arts history, as the champion stands tall amidst the roaring adoration of the world.